Have gnomes been terrorising South America for years? This is All Things Creepy, let's begin. Gnome sightings have been a common feature in South America for many years, and they most notably cropped up on YouTube in the mid to late 2000s. In this video we're going to go over some of the key pieces of gnome footage. We're going to try and explain and, if possible, debunk where we can, and then after we're going to go over the history of gnomes, especially in South America. This first video has origins in the late 2000s, presumably in a Spanish-speaking country in South America. The original video has been taken down from YouTube.
Ya, güey. Te quedas aquí. ¡Calor! ¡Ya no! Ya, güey. Voy por él. ¡Ay, no mames, güey! ¡Ya vieron!
There appear to be some young children playing football or soccer, and suddenly a seemingly previously inanimate object with a pointed head seems to dart across the length of the wall. Interestingly, they made no reaction at all to this creature until it moved, implying they either thought it was an inanimate object or it was so well disguised they hadn't even noticed it until it started to move. As soon as it moves, they start screaming hysterically, and then the video shortly after cuts off. As will become a theme throughout this video, gnome videos are often captured in extremely poor quality. This is due to a combination of factors. They're mostly in South America in the late 2000s, so a lot of the phone cameras that we have today, back then it would have just been a flip phone with very poor quality, especially for a video. And if you're cynical, it's a little bit suspicious that suddenly there's far less gnome sightings now that everyone has a high quality camera on their smartphone. Nobody's come forth about this video, and its original upload has been taken down, so ultimately the true answer is a mystery, but in my opinion, looking and analysing the footage, I believe this is a hoax. I think someone off screen has strings attached to this inanimate object, which is of course shaped like a gnome, and they quickly pulled the string to tug the creature along the wall to create that effect. This next piece of footage was taken in Argentina.
Allá. Que pica un gorro, parece, mira, güey. Pichote ese, güey. Mira, que puta.
It shows a group of people casually talking. It's unclear exactly what they're talking about, something about cold weather and clothing, and then they pan across to see a strange gnome-shaped creature shuffling towards them along a pathway. Whilst they do seem startled, ultimately they seem to be chuckling almost nervously at it, which is a lot different to the screaming reaction we previously had. So once again we have potato cam footage, but from what we can see, this creature does resemble loosely a gnome. It has the pointed head, 4 limbs, and is very short. However, there is one theory, and it seems a bit out there, but maybe it explains this, and that is that this is real, the footage is real, but it's not a gnome, it's an anteater. So that seems crazy, right? But apparently when anteaters are threatened, they rear up on their hind legs, the tail acts as a tripod, so you can't really see the tail because it's poking against the ground, and obviously when they point their head up in the air, it kind of looks like a gnome's hat because they have a very long pointed nose. And they do this for defensive reasons. It lets them use their claws quite readily, and it makes them look a bit bigger. The only issue with this is that the tail that I mentioned earlier, it's almost impossible to see here. You can't really see a tail at all. Now that might purely be due to the extremely low resolution and poor quality of this footage. So it doesn't rule it out, but maybe this is genuinely some kind of strange creature, or perhaps it's a hoax, but I'm leaning more towards the anteater theory. So here's another piece of footage from a similar area and a similar time. Once again we have the small gnome-like creature, extremely bad potato quality, and this time we see the creature moving along from a horizontal angle, so it's not face on. And in my opinion, this once again is most likely an anteater. And that sounds crazy, but if you take into account the extremely poor quality, hiding some of the features, especially the tail, this could very easily be an anteater on its hind legs in a defensive pose. But before people start raging in the comments, I must preface, I only think it might be an anteater. I'm not 100% sure, because how can you be with quality this poor? It could be anything at the end of the day. I'm just leaning towards the anteater theory. So next up we have a rare instance of non-potato quality footage. This is from Mexico.
Mañana vamos contra el Atlético de Madrid. ¿Para qué la avientas? ¿Qué es esto? ¿Qué es esto? ¡Ve, vamos! ¿Lo viste? Sí. No.
Some children are chilling in, I guess this looks like a kitchen of some sorts, and then suddenly a small creature about 2 foot tall very rapidly moves from one room to the other. The kids start panicking and the footage cuts off there. The creature seems to have a hood, almost like Jawas from Star Wars. So a few things stand out about this footage. Most notably for me is the reaction of the children. It seems a lot like acting. The way this one child rolls around on the floor, that's not a natural response to seeing something that causes you to be this scared. You'd run away. You wouldn't lay down on the floor and start rolling side to side. So what about the creature itself? Well, they could have done this in a number of ways. It could be someone with dwarfism, it could be a very small child. Potentially they could have trained a small monkey to do this, that's much less likely. And potentially it's CGI as well, although I doubt that because it matches the frame rates of the video very well. So I feel like this one is a hoax. So now we have another potato video. This one once again shows a gnome, the pointy head, small stature, seemingly hopping up and down this time, so that's a different behaviour. So this is an interesting one. The movement of this creature is definitely different to a lot of the others. So this could be another anteater. I'm not sure if they hop like that when they're in this defensive stance, or potentially it could be a marionette. Someone could be controlling the movements of this creature via strings, and that would create this hopping effect when they're moving it along. And of course, extremely poor potato footage is the perfect thing to cover up strings. So now that we've gone through that footage, and I'm sure you've left your opinions down below, which ones you think are real, fake, or any alternative opinions, why are there so many gnome sightings in South America? Well, although gnomes in the West, in Europe and America, North America that is, are perceived as innocent creatures that defend your garden and are inanimate objects,
a dubious little creature getting up to mischief. This is no good.
South America, they more closely match duendes. So although duendes superficially resemble a gnome in appearance, in terms of height, sometimes they wear a hat, their behaviour is more in line with that of a goblin or a fairy. So in the folklore, they live within the walls of a household, usually within a child's bedroom, and they will come out at night and steal the child. And in some strange instances, apparently they come out and clip the child's toenails, and this often leads to missing toes. So I'm not sure how that folklore has come about. That seems very weird and very creepy, but I can definitely see why people are more freaked out by these quote-unquote gnomes in South America than, for instance, where I live in the United Kingdom or the United States of America. The origins of duendes is quite interesting because obviously a lot of the folklore comes from the colonizing countries of South America, Portugal and Spain. They have their own versions of the duendes folklore, which more closely resemble that of a goblin or a dwarf or a gnome. And then you have the South American variants, which mix a bit of that Aztec or Mayan influence. For instance, in some native Latin American cultures, there is a belief that something that resembles the duendes, that they identify as the duendes, lives in cloud forests within the mountain range. So there could be a number of origins for this. For instance, we have the pygmy tribes in Africa. Maybe there were tribes like that at some point in South America. Or maybe this is a case of mistaken identity for another primate. There are lots of New World monkeys. Spider monkeys, for instance, can have somewhat human characteristics, especially when viewed through dense fog. And there's interestingly also a folklore of duendes in the Philippines. So Perhaps that shows the influence of Spain back when they colonized the Philippines. But in the Philippines, they tend to be more spiritual, so they're often depicted as ghost-like or, as I mentioned before, spirits. But once again, they exist in deserted areas within the walls of houses, so some of those themes are still there. So in my opinion, that rounds things off quite nicely. I think these videos are so sensational, especially in the West, because gnomes are a weird thing to us, right? They don't come across as scary, so seeing a gnome is more surreal than scary. But in South America, they've got a lot of folklore behind them, so it's the equivalent of seeing maybe a vampire in public or a goblin, something that we're much more familiar with as up to no good. I also think that most of these sightings took place in the late 2000s because that was when flip phones were easily accessible. You had access to an extremely poor quality camera that could disguise a lot of the features of hoax, strings, puppets, and also if it was a misidentified animal such as an anteater, then the finer details that would make it more obvious that it's an anteater could be disguised once again by that poor quality. So it was a perfect storm really, and I think it is quite telling that we don't see many of these sightings anymore. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Like the video if you did, share it with a friend, hit the bell if you want notifications, and of course if you haven't already, subscribe for more gnome content.